I do really want to learn more about your dark retreat. Um, First of all, I think you told me a little bit about it. When did you do it? It was like last year?
I did my dark retreat at the end of um, 2017. It was the last days I spent in my old apartment. It was days before I had to move to a new place, and I wanted to use the opportunity because the old place had a really good big foyer that you can cut out from all light, so it would be a completely dark space but still big enough that I wanted to spend 10 days in it. I had read about just in the month before that, I had happened upon these information about dark retreats, and they're being done in Thailand and in somewhere in South America. I forgot in which country, where they have special places underground, and you go there for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, or some people even spend 40 days,
Wow.
and it's completely devoid of all light. What is the rationale behind that is that what happens biologically is when you're completely in the dark, almost going back to the womb, right? Completely no light. What happens is that the first 3 days, so 72 hours, you sleep nonstop. And it really happened with me, and is considered extremely restorative. And
So
after,
is this like something that happens to almost everybody who does a dark retreat?
it should happen to everyone. Yeah, it's because the natural mechanism of seeing the sun and getting up doesn't happen, and the body just keeps sleeping. So you end up just sleeping and waking up shortly and falling asleep again, and waking up shortly, falling asleep. So actually, it's very recommended to do it even for 24 hours. Sometimes if you're really burnt out, I actually did it a few times in my new place, just for 24 hours. Just to kind of renew yourself. In any case,
It's like almost like a tool anybody can use anytime you're feeling burned out, as like a mini dark retreat.
yes, because it's a way for first of all, the senses to relax, because the vision, there's no vision, right? Because it's only dark. Anyways, the sense of vision is the most overexploited in today's world, because we're constantly watching stuff. So it's a way to, and then when the mind has nothing to look at, then it kind of turns inward. And in any case, after 3 days, you kind of wake up, and the idea is that on the 5th day, DMT, which is the substance that creates visions or hallucinations, as some people. When you take magic mushrooms and such substances, you start having hallucinations, right? But they are not in the substance itself. This is the DMT, is something that is in the 3rd chakra. So on the 5th day, it opens up, and you start seeing. You start, whatever is in your mind, you start seeing it. All the images and things that are deep in your subconscious, you start seeing them, almost like you're watching a dream.
So for you, why, kind of backtracking a little bit, what was your initial reason for doing the dark retreat? Like, what was going on in your life at that time? Actually, I don't know if we were talking that much during this time. I know you told me about the dark retreat after, but yeah, what was kind of like going on in your life?
Well, I have been on a very long-term, intense spiritual path in which I have strived for self-realization. And I am obsessed with the idea of going inward and shedding light on all the darkness that is inside of us. And obviously, experiments such as a dark retreat is a great getaway into your inner world. and it can create a lot of clarity. It's almost like what the ancient hermits hid in the caves, in the Tibetan tradition and all that. And actually they were doing dark retreats because the cave is the darkest possible space on earth. In dark retreats, you open up to the spiritual dimension through your third chakra. So DMT, which is the biological substance, is in other
that
ways
activates on that fifth day once you've kind of taken that rest.
Exactly. And I didn't do it for so long, and obviously I didn't do it in completely full darkness because there were small rays of light. But people who have done it in those special places underground for 40 days, they really, those images from their subconscious, they really started seeing them very clearly. And as a matter of fact, if you read books from ancient ascetics and hermits, for example, there is a very famous Russian hermit called Saint Serafim Sarovsky. So in this book it says how, because he separated himself completely, and how at the beginning, it's talked through the Christian imagery, and they say how he was seeing those, all of a sudden he started seeing like tigers in the night throwing themselves at him, or dark figures. And it's exactly what was happening, is that his third eye was activated, so all the dark stuff from his subconscious was being projected outward, and he was able to see. Because again, remember, you're not seeing through your physical eyes because you're in complete darkness. Literally, your inner eye is being activated, so you're seeing.
This is really interesting. Yeah, like on a daily basis, it's like you don't even realize probably until you do a dark retreat how much our focus is on the outside world, and how much of our inside world that we have completely, lost touch with, or we can't connect with.
As a matter of fact, there is a big spiritual teacher from the 20th century called Barry Long. He passed away. He talks about the senses. These are actually other teachers from the Buddhist tradition and stuff probably talk about this. I have heard this very clearly from Barry Long, and I can explain what he says. He said that we have learned to really focus on the external reality. So, so Priya, right now, look at an object that's right in front of you. Look at it for a little bit, and I invite the audience also to look at something. Now, what happens is that we have gotten so used to look very aggressively outward. So we are spending our energy goes through that object. Now try to look at the same object, but keep your energy, so keep your consciousness centered inside of your body, and look at that object almost like you're looking through it, not with fully open eyes, but a little bit closed. So you're looking at it, but without your energy going outward. Does this make sense? So you're looking at it, but while all your consciousness is still inside of your body, so you're keeping yourself centered. Do you see? It's a different way of seeing.
This is exactly how we should be living life on a daily basis. It's like remembering, keep staying centered and grounded, and remembering that the life energy within us. But I think we, have a tendency to just things catch our eye, and people say stuff, and all this stuff happens in the external world, and all of a sudden,
and we get lost in that because we throw our energy outward, and then you have to come back. And the idea is never to throw your energy outward. So you're looking more dispassionately in this way. You're looking with less intense, with less desire, right? Because when you're staying focused inside, you cannot look so what is the word? You cannot look so 100%, almost like eating it with your eyes, right? And the same goes
what's interesting is that I've done many different kinds of meditation, and the one that works, one of the ones that works the absolute best for me is the almost like the exercise that you just led us all through, which is kind of not closing my eyes, but keeping them partially open, staring at an object or a dot in front of me, but doing so in a way where I'm kind of not really, I'm looking at it, but I'm not looking at it at the same time.
The good way to put it is that there should not be striving. And that's exactly the Buddhist idea of how to live life. Is like they shouldn't be the way like people strive for goals, but it's more like naturally, right, without effort. Because striving means that you want to get to something, you want to capture it. That's what the logical mind is. The ego wants to get things. So when you look at something with all your strength, right, it's a way of like trying to get it in a way, right? And the other way is more calm, more a little bit more passive, right? More feminine, so to speak, because you're resting in your center and you're just looking, but without the striving to somehow get it or to get something from it.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I have another question for you. So what you were talking about, the substance that begins to be released on the 5th day. What is that again?
It's called DMT. Is the reason why people use hallucinogenic drugs like magic mushrooms or LSD, but they don't.
So how is that related to the 3rd chakra?
Because what happens is that these substances, like magic mushrooms and LSD and all of that, they don't have anything in them. Everything is inside of us. This is something that people don't realize. Those drugs, in my opinion, I haven't done enough research. I think what they do is that they somehow, they interfere with the neurons or whatever. I'm not a biologist. Somehow they calm the nervous system that is responsible for this active interference with the world, right? And they somehow probably so that once this is calmed down, the 3rd chakra can naturally open up. So they are somehow facilitating, but they themselves.
So they kind of lessen they get rid of like the obstacles to their chakra opening by kind of loosening your focus on the sensory perceptions from the outside world.
Right, and that's why I have heard a lot of people who use those substances almost like say, this is my way to enlightenment and so on. And I think this is very tricky because it's tricky because the first time maybe it's some kind of a shortcut, but it's something external. And whatever you're gonna see through your 1st chakra, through your 3rd chakra, due to these drugs, is still your own unenlightened subconscious. You have to do it. So there is no easy path to. Maybe you will see some things. Yes, the DMT will get activated, and you will see some things that are different from the normal reality. But once the effect is over, you're still back to where you were, because you don't know what exactly you are not. You don't have the awareness to know, and you don't have the awareness to keep this experience in your real life.
Ram Dass talks about this topic in his book Be Here Now.
Yeah, so there's no easy way. The path to enlightenment is the hardest possible. So
yeah, actually I was watching something yesterday after a conversation that we had yesterday. Man, what was I watching? Oh, it was the Eckhart Tolle Q&A live that you actually sent to me. And you had already gone to sleep, but I was watching it, and he said something. He said, like, we were talking about knowledge yesterday in the conversation we were having, and how, maybe like we try to accumulate a lot of knowledge, but then there's also like this spiritual path that is kind of separated from this desire to accumulate knowledge. And he said that the most difficult knowledge to obtain is a knowledge about yourself.
We should say to people that when you said that that's when I went to sleep, that you are actually on the west coast of America in California, and I am in Eastern Europe in Bulgaria. So we have our conversations and everything with a 10-hour time difference, and it really doesn't matter, but it's a fun fact that we are.
But we met on the West Coast when we were both in school.
That the deepest conversations don't need physical presence. I was thinking about that while you're saying. So, well, he probably means, because when he says the knowledge about yourself, he doesn't mean the ego. That's what happened in the dark retreat, that you can take a really objective look at the logical mind, but that's not who you really are. And who you really are is really the consciousness itself, and there is no logical knowledge that you can obtain about it, because it has to be experienced. It's an experiential thing, and well, knowledge is a way to help you to get there, right? It's you read, so you're gathering intellectual knowledge, but at some point that intellectual knowledge has to lead you to experiences.
So then that's where, like, the 5th day you were talking about your retreat, there's so much good stuff in here to dissect. So now jumping back to your dark retreat, that 5th day, you said that you started having more like visions.
So for me, it didn't work exactly like this, because as I said, there were still a couple of flickers of light through the... By the way, it's amazing how if right now you turn off the light, you'll say it's total darkness. But once you're in total darkness, even one little ray of light seems like huge, right? This is the relativity of perception. Nevertheless, so I could not succeed completely in activating my DMT just because I was not in complete darkness. Because you will realize that all of a sudden that even a couple of rays of light is like a lot. It's like being in the womb, you know? However, I had some very interesting experiences in those. I was there in 10 days, so the remaining 5 days. First of all, what I experienced was, because there is nothing for the eyes to see, and there is nothing for the mind to focus on external, right? Then the mind has, by saying mind, I mean the logical reason, because mind in the Buddhist tradition means everything, right? So we can talk about sometime that concept of mind. But the logical mind has nothing to look at. And you know, the mind is like a monkey, so it needs something. And so it can only then start to look at itself, right? Because eyes do not see anything. The mind has nothing to look at, to read, to, you know, to observe other people, you know, this and that. So the mind turns towards itself. And all of a sudden, obviously I started, you know, as I'm sitting in the darkness, I'm thinking about some of the big issues in my life at that moment, right? The big, you know, things that goals and things that are on my mind, right? Everybody has these. And all of a sudden I had an incredibly strong clarity. I was almost seeing my different thoughts on a certain subject. So for example, there was something that I was struggling with, right? I had a desire that I was not able to accomplish, and all of a sudden thinking about that goal and why I'm not accomplishing it, all of a sudden I almost saw, this is the DMT kicking in, almost like I saw it visually, how I have different trains of thoughts about this, and some of them are contradicting another. I'm not going to tell you exactly what I was thinking about, but let's take another subject. Let's say money, because it's on many people's mind. Let's say you say, oh, I want to have more money to live comfortably. Why is it not happening? Why am I still struggling? And all of a sudden you see, because this darkness and everything again gives you the luxury to really look at your mind, and you almost see how, wait a minute, I have some trains that are positive that say I want more money. Some more money would allow me to do this and this, but at the same time there's some other trains going in another direction. These are like, let's say, negative beliefs about money, right? Well, if I have more money, this will go against what my parents told me. All of a sudden I became very clear, almost like I saw them visually, those different trains, and I realized why I was not reaching my goal, because I have contradictory thoughts, some of them more clear than others, and some you might not even be clear that you're having some of them. That's why it's very useful, and you and I will be doing this with the audience, kind of clarifying your thoughts on certain subjects, right? Like money related.
That's really interesting, because it's kind of like there's also it's the other aspect of law of attraction, where what you focus on expands, and your intentions that you cultivate and that frequency needs to very clearly match that intention or where you'd like to be.
And the thing is that with the law of attraction is done very, in many cases, superficially, where they tell people or books say just focus on this and write write this and that. But it's not gonna work if you have negative beliefs that you're not even aware of.
Right.
So you have to. It's you. So it's you.
It's like we can't see. We oftentimes, most of the time, do not have the capacity to clearly see our thoughts.
Exactly. So if you tell me, I want to meet a partner, and you're not meeting a partner, and you say, but why am I not meeting a partner? I've been wanting it. I've been doing visualizations. I have been writing stuff. I have been reading books. If it's not happening, something in you is obstructing it. This is something that people don't realize. And
so what's interesting is, even when, like, let's say, meditation, right, is a tool to connect more with ourselves, and also, we can conscientiously think about what our limiting beliefs are. But still, even when doing these activities, there is still the external sensations that are occupying our mind. And so all of that brain power that we have up here is, like you said, that, and our energy is still focused outward. And so through this intense and complete darkness, you have no choice, like you said, but to turn inward. And now all that energy is, has no choice but to be applied to understanding, what's happening inside you. And that is, I could see how that's just it's like magic. It's like completely allows you to see what's actually happening in your brain.
Yes, because the truth is, people want to build stuff, right? People want to build. They want to build a better life, a better relationship, this and that. But the truth is, and all the self-help and new age is based on the building aspect. Meditate, visualize the new house and you're building. But the truth is, you cannot build if there is something to be destroyed. So imagine it, almost your mind is like let's say a building plot, 100 by 100 meters. I don't know the American measures, right? You cannot build a beautiful house if there is a ton of issues and darkness there still. First, you have to do the destruction and clearing before you can build. Because even if you manage to build something small, sooner or later it will fall apart because you haven't cleared everything. So the foundation is not stable enough. So whether you like it or not, everybody wants to build because building is positive. It means something beautiful and better. But first you have to do the dirty work if you have it. And most people do have it. So first you have to...
And also there's an imbalance of energy in the way that our society is structured, where there's a lot more of that. Actually, I don't know if you've ever watched Sadhguru.
Yes, I have watched him. I have watched him.
So he was having daily talks during the pandemic. We're still kind of in that phase, but earlier on. And in one of them, he said something that I found very interesting, and it was that he was saying that the humanity currently is dominated by the masculine energy.
Yeah, of course.
And there is an imbalance where the feminine energy has been suppressed for a very long time. And so what that means is that the masculine energy, he's saying, is all about kind of go, build more, get more and get more. And the feminine energy is more settling where you are, connecting, nurturing, being happy with the now.
Not only that, yes, but feminine energy, self-reflection, going within.
Yes.
Because within is where it all starts, not without. And what you're saying is very interesting, and it can be seen actually very clearly because there's external proof for this. Because the latest, sorry if I interrupted you. Do you want to say, because my thought?
No, go for it.
The latest data is that right now 1 in 40 kids in America is being born with special needs, which is the autism spectrum, especially boys, which is a huge number. So we're talking about 1 to 2% of kids. So there's a huge increase in autism. What is autism? In autism, usually what you see is that there is a slight underdevelopment of the right hemisphere of the brain. The right hemisphere and the left one obviously gets like hyper developed as a balancing act. The right hemisphere that is underdeveloped, this is the feminine hemisphere. This is the hemisphere of empathy, listening, connecting, creativity. I mean, all the professions that are in the past decades, are all the engineering professions are being extolled, and actually humanitarian professions are being frowned upon. That's also another. And so you having hyper-developed left hemispheres, which is exactly like numbers, remembering, and a lot of kids are being born like this. And these kids, they're not separate cases, so parents should not feel guilty. I have people like that in my life around me. They should not feel guilty like they're doing something wrong. This is part of a much bigger trend in humanity. Exactly, that there is a disbalance between the right and the left hemisphere, because the right hemisphere, which is the introversion, reflection, all these feminine aspects, are being less valued.
Or the crab versus the rooster.
Yes, exactly. And computers, with all the amazing things they bring, they artificial intelligence, computers, data science, all of this, unfortunately, has a negative side as well, which is that it contributes to putting this emphasis on the left brain more and more and more. So people, I believe, will be increasingly being born with this disbalance. But we have a way of going to different topics, even though they're all related because of how we think. Both
they are related, but it seems like so you were talking about kind of like, we're talking about law of attraction and how sometimes some of that is done in like a superficial level almost, where we're just focusing on what we want to build
Exactly,
rather than
because
this inner aspect. Yeah.
and there is a lack of understanding. That's the basis of all spiritual teachings, is that everything starts from within, and everything is first in your mind, and then it reflects on the outside world. And people live as if it's the opposite, that you have to get something in the outside world to fix and feel good and everything. So everything is turned upside down. But
hey, that is really interesting. So like, okay, so when I think about, when I hear about the dark retreat and even everything that you've been talking about so far, I feel like for most people it feels like something very different, like your world is being turned upside down, because now all of a sudden you don't have any of these external things vying for your attention, but actually that is the world turned right side up.
Exactly.
Meaning that we are meant as humans to start from within.
Yeah, and by the way, many people also start the dark retreat and they cannot go beyond 48 hours. I have a long history of going through experiences, but we'll talk about this another time. So for many people might be even impossible to do 10 days because it's too much.
It's like you have to work your way up to it. It's hard. It's so different from how we live life.
Yeah, but you can try it for 24 hours. And I wanted to say also to address the other really big revelation that I had during this dark retreat.
Yeah.
So at some point, maybe on the 7th day or something, it was winter, and I had a convector through which I was getting heat. And the convector has like a small button where how many degrees are in the room, you can regulate it. So I had to put it at, and you sort of turn this button up and down with the degrees. So I had to put it at 20 degrees Celsius, which is normal temperature. I don't know in Fahrenheit, maybe 70 or something. And the thing is that because I'm completely in the dark moving around, and at some point, and I have to say this button is extremely small. The letters for the degrees are extremely, extremely small. At some point, I moved something, and I wasn't sure whether I hadn't dabbled with this button, and I wasn't sure how many degrees is now. Okay, and I got concerned about whether now it's maybe getting too cold or something. And I didn't want to look at the button. I had it covered with something because the button has this really, really, really small light, literally like a pin, right? But obviously in total darkness, even the smallest light, is something. So I didn't want to look but because I was concerned, so I was like, okay, well, this kind of undermines my everything, but I'll have to look because, and so I just took a really quick look. And again, so the light itself is extremely small, as big as a pin. The letters are extremely small. I don't know what to compare them to. Maybe like a small letter on your pen or something that's really, really small. And so for a flicker of a second, I saw the number 2, right? Because it's part of the degrees. I just looked. So at that point, for 7 days, I hadn't seen anything, right?
Wow.
But I am a very mature person in the 30s, so my mind is already very mature. Keep that in mind. Only after 7 days of not seeing anything, I look at this number 2, which is extremely small, and all of a sudden, I was in incredible pain. I felt like this number is being stamped like those animals that they stamp them on my brain.
Oh, like
And in my
branded.
brain, I started seeing the tube bigger and bigger, and it was physically, viscerally painful to my brain. It was incredibly painful for maybe 5 minutes. And what I'm trying to say, if this is happening to somebody, a mature brain who is only has been outside of the world for 7 days, imagine a baby that's coming from the spiritual womb and of the world and is in the womb for 9 months. Imagine what a tremendous impact every single thing makes on that baby's brain. If that small letter 2, imagine if that baby is born in a toxic environment with parents who are yelling, somebody's drinking, if a small letter 2 had such a horribly painful impact on my mind, imagine something so much worse on a baby that has been for so much longer outside. What I'm trying to say is the degree to which early trauma is traumatizing and it has branded itself on the brain is so underestimated that we cannot even imagine. And that's why it's so hard afterwards for people with trauma to really recover, because it's just, the wound is just beyond anything. I will never forget how painful looking at this number 2 was. And again, like, I'm an old person, it's just a number 2, nobody's yelling at me, it's not a trauma. Only after 7 days in darkness. I don't know how to describe it better. I'm trying to find the words.
That was a very good description, and I'm just like, I'm not saying anything because I'm speechless. It reminds me of, like for somebody who believes in the concept of rebirth, and how I think there's different schools of thought, right? Some people think that the earth and being reborn here as a human is it's a great, like, obviously a great gift, because you have the conscious mind that you can use to elevate yourself spiritually. But also, on the other hand, I'm trying to imagine in some, like, Buddhist traditions, the idea is that obviously you keep being reborn, and you can be reborn as a hellish being, you can be reborn as a heavenly being, and then after being a heavenly being, then you can again be reborn as a human. And it's, let's say that, the baby that you were just describing, let's say that baby is even like our spirit is coming, which our spirit is coming from source. Let's say our spirit is coming directly from a heavenly place. And then we're born here into this world with, it's like indescribable. We're so desensitized.
Yeah, the word desensitized
the world
is
around
very
us.
good. The word desensitized is very good. That's a word that kept rolling in my mind immediately after that experience. We're incredibly desensitized through the experience. The material experience is incredibly cruel. Because when I finally turned on the light on the 10th day, for the first minutes or more, I wasn't seeing the objects in the material form. I was seeing them on atomic level. So I was seeing them more as vibrating substances. And only then everything solidified. So the world of material form is as far from source as it can get. And yeah.
Compared to, let's say a heavenly being that's reborn on this planet. And once we're born, we're so desensitized. We learn to quickly be desensitized
because we
to
have to survive. Because we have
all of the stimuli here. And the more, like you said, the material form is as far from source as we can get. in terms of I think the grossness, like the heaviness that it has compared to the lightness of source energy and just the pure energy, is that we become so desensitized to all the stimuli that it's really hard. Like, we forget where we come from. We forget who we are at our essence.
Exactly, yeah, we forget who we are. We get lost in the world of forms. I mean, this is for another conversation, which I'm sure we will have. What is the purpose of us being born in the material form? And there's a lot of that can be said about that. But yes, for this conversation, suffice it to say that yes, we need to survive, and I'm sure even smaller baby, the brain exactly becomes completely desensitized very quickly. That's the only way to survive here.
It's remarkable, like how I'm thinking about your experience with the number 2, and exactly like you said, that's such a small hint of what a baby must be going through.
No, but
how quickly
and
that baby learns to be or becomes desensitized to all of that.
And my point was not only, yes, that's for everyone, but my point was more, since as a person who has grown with a lot of trauma, is just to raise the awareness of how incredibly damaging is toxic environment and traumatic environment is for babies, right?
That's also, actually, this is another conversation. Obviously, this is great. We're getting so many ideas here for follow-on conversations, but this reminds me of something else, which is so for me personally, I always believe in smiling at everybody. For example, if if I interact with somebody, I treat everybody with kindness, or I try to, even if somebody is doing something that is not kind to me, because you never know what someone's background is, or what their history is, or what they've gone through. And even if they've had your thoughts about trauma are kind of sparking this line of thinking for me. But even if let's say somebody is really mean to you, and let's say nothing much has happened to them over the last, like reasonable justification for them being mean, but we don't really understand the depth of their experiences coming into this world and before. And this trauma that you're talking about, it's so like we so easily almost like try to pretend it's not there or forget. We don't try. It just, again, we become desensitized to it. And so I just, like, my point is that we don't know, we cannot understand or comprehend or even try to comprehend the extent to the issues or the trauma that somebody else might have gone through in this lifetime or in previous lifetimes. And so I feel like we should always try to be kind whenever we can to others. I know this is kind of off topic, but it reminded me of that.
It is very relevant because as a matter of fact, exactly the people who are negative towards you, right, mean or aggressive or hurt you, these are people who have been hurt. So to speak, this is something that happened to them and now they're externalizing it. Because if somebody was born in a completely harmonious environment, which is not possible, of course, they would not be, right? They will have only goodness inside of them. So as a matter of fact, once, I don't know who was talking about it, Tony Robbins or somebody, they were saying if somebody's yelling at you, or like, yelling in the sense of like criticizing, yelling, treat this as their plea for help. Like they're yelling at you, but actually what they're trying to do is like they're crying for help. They don't realize it. So
another way to put it is what Eckhart Tolle says, is that this person is suffering, obviously.
Exactly. So everybody needs, because the more logical thing, because again, we touched upon a very important subject, which is that in the material world, everything is upside down from the spiritual realm. The
Yeah.
logical mind sees things as in a negative, in the opposite way. We can talk about this in another time. Very important topic. The logical thing is like for you to think like, oh, I can have compassion and be kind to people who are nice to me, but people who are rotten towards me, they don't deserve it. But it's actually the opposite. Exactly, the people who treat you badly, they need your compassion most desperately. And I know it's very hard for the ego to do it, because again, it's contrary to the logical mind, right? It's contrary to the logic.
This is very interesting.
More
Always
that
be
can be
kind.
said, and of course, obviously, we have to probably wrap up the conversation. And
Okay, so tell me about the end of your retreat, and because I know this is actually the part that I remember most from the first time you were telling me about your retreat, which is what happened when you finished, and like how striking of an experience it was coming back into the quote unquote real world, which is not really the case, but coming back into the physical world with all of the physical stimuli.
well, I mean, I kind of said it basically. When I turned on the light, first of all, I couldn't look straight at the light. It was too blinding, even though it was already darkness. I got out of the retreat with 7, 8 in the night, so it was almost darkness outside, but it was too bright for me because I was used to the darkness. So again, the relative, my senses were very sensitive. I was looking at objects, the furniture, and I was seeing them on a molecular basis. Like I was seeing the movement of the atoms as opposed to a solid shape. But then, very quickly, there is something about the material, the human, especially, that we are very adaptable. So the senses of, little by little, they adapt, and then you start, you go down to the slowest level, which is the solid shapes. Solid shapes, they have the slowest energy. And yes, it struck me how desensitized our minds are. Like, we've forgotten what we experienced as babies, and only in 10 days I had gotten a glimpse of how sensitive, how incredibly delicate, incredibly, the words are too heavy and clumsy to explain the incredible delicacy of the mind, of the spiritual realm. That's why we don't see the angels and the higher beings. Like they cannot get down to our frequency. They just cannot tolerate it. That's why we cannot see them in material form. We can only connect with them in the mind realm, because this realm here is so incredibly crude, is compared to that it is just mind-blowing. And it's mind-blowing, really, as we discussed earlier, how we just forgotten, and we just live here. And not only we live here, but people are striving towards goals and things as if that's gonna bring them happiness. How is it going to bring you happiness when your true essence is something that is so foreign to anything here, to a car or to a swimming pool? Like, what can that give you? It's just like ridiculous to think that you can find any happiness.
Yet we all do it every day.
Yeah.
What recommendations would you have for somebody who wants to do their own dark retreat at home, just like you did? How should they prepare?
Well,
everything?
they will have to read about it. Maybe they can watch a couple of videos on YouTube. There's some people sharing the experience. Obviously, as everything, then this is another topic we will cover. You have to listen to your intuition, to your feeling. You have to feel good about it. If you feel uneasy and uncomfortable, obviously you shouldn't do it because you're not ready. And I mean, there is no formula, right? So you follow your own path. So you read some things, you reflect, you see how you feel, and you do. I had, if I'm not mistaken, I probably wanted to do maybe even 2 weeks, but I stopped at a point where I decided to stop. So there's no like.
Mm-hmm.
There is no, so to speak, and I mean, that's again against the spiritual path, which is just pure experience. So it's not as easy as if I do this for 14 days, I'll be enlightened or something. So everybody, you can try it, and if in 2 days you're feeling very uncomfortable, and also timing, and there's so many things in place, and just the best thing is to follow your feeling, and to get and to, I mean, I personally believe in listening to people, watching others who have had done something that works for me. I think it's good to, rather than just jump into something, because the spiritual path is very tricky. It's not like it's not like our roads out there in the material reality where you get signs, this town, 50 kilometers, that town. It's actually, you're in the deep forest, like you are Bilbo Baggins from the Lord of the Rings. You're going on a journey where there's all kinds of creatures and things, and so that's
Well,
it. And
thank you for sharing your story about your dark retreat.
You're welcome. Actually, it's been on my mind to, at some point, to do like a big one in Thailand or something, although at this point I'm not sure if it's necessary. We'll see how things go, but I just want to say that I'll be happy to talk to people who may have some questions, and we have to see how we can connect with our audience. And
yeah, feel free to send us a message on Instagram. You can find us Crab and Rooster. And we also have our website linked here in the show notes for the podcast episode.
And
so definitely reach out.
So it's very important to us that we are connecting really directly with anybody who's listening, because listening is one thing, but also sometimes you may need to ask a question and really get some guidance. So we are trying to create a community where people can help each other, because not everybody has the luxury of maybe having people around them that are available to speak, and everybody has different life circumstances. So we want to create a community that's really authentic and heartfelt and cares for one another,
to help us all through this, you said, this deep forest.
Exactly,
with creatures and unknowns.
We can be like the fellowship of the ring. Because yes, it's almost impossible, if not impossible, to do this alone. And
yeah. Well, I think that was a wonderful first episode. Thank you again for sharing your story. I don't think I learned all of this the last time that you chatted, that you told me about your dark retreat. I mean, there's so much more that I learned and discovered today. So I think it was really cool to hear about it, and also very, very deep conversation. And until next time, episode 2 coming up.
Yes, it was very
nice.
Thank
you, everybody.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next time as well.